Adora was visiting the Emperor in order to give him a warning. Damrada kept him from doing so. But what if Adora's information had been passed on to Kondo? The Imperial army wouldn't have been nearly as devastated, for one, and even before that, they would have taken on a far different battle strategy against Rimuru and his band. It was easy to believe that a man of Damrada's intelligence would have noticed this, and thus it was safe to assume his actions were intentional. But what was his purpose? Maybe he was testing the waters. Perhaps, yes. Kogali gave Yuuki's suggestion a satisfied smile. You have to tolerate a lot of sacrifices in order to create someone truly strong. Perhaps he was trying to use us as pawns for the creation of this force as well. Or maybe he was trying to take us in. You know how Kogali and I were pretty much the only people Clayman accepted orders from, right? Yeah. No doubt about that. So if he managed to set Clayman loose like that, maybe he had some kind of secret trick to accomplish that. True. Brainwashing, for example. Yuuki nodded at Kogali. I think he might have cast a thought guidance spell on him, even if it wasn't all that powerful. Maybe that spell was driven by a magic item like what we had, or for all we know, he had some kind of mind domination ability like Maribel's. The reasoning hardened the faces of everyone in the room. Sounds like trouble, Misha said to a nodding audience. Looking at them, Yuuki smiled. I wouldn't worry, though. That kind of power doesn't work on me. So what I'm gonna do right now is touch each of you in turn. Is that alright with everyone? They all agreed to it. Refusing would be akin to confessing that you were someone else's puppet. Yuuki was giving everyone a chance to prove their innocence, and none of them were about to turn it down. Well, it looks like nobody here's brainwashed anyway. I mean, I would have noticed if you suddenly started talking differently. I knew you'd all be fine, as long as none of you were out there alone. So I was in even more danger than I thought, huh? Laplace said, standing up and looking around. But Yuuki and Kogali both spoke up to deny it. Nah, you're fine. Right. You're the last person who needs to worry about that. That brought the grouchy Laplace back to his seat. What the heck? You could at least pretend to worry a little more about me. It was more than enough to quell the chamber's gloomy atmosphere. Everyone shared a laugh, their thoughts shifting away from darker topics. Yuuki, appreciative of that, spoke up to guide the conversation back his way. So regardless of what Damrada's motivations are, the question is, what should we do now? Yes. I'd like to ask him about how much our plans have been compromised. Whoa, you sure we have the time for stuff like that? He knows exactly what we're up to already, don't he? Yeah, I told Damrada everything we were planning to do. We didn't exactly keep it a secret. Okay, so shouldn't we be getting out of here? Well, that's not too possible, either. Yuuki's faction was now soundly based at the Empire. He still had a few people undercover in the Western nations, but that was only a tiny handful. There was no way he could lie low over there, and preparing a new hideout wasn't a very easy thing even in the best of times. Most of all, they had neither the time nor the right preparation to allow all the members of his faction to escape safely. One thing I can tell you for sure is that I can't run Cerberus by myself, said Misha. I relied heavily on Damrada's work skills for that, and I don't even know everyone he had working for him. Vega, the third leader of that group, was good for little more than wanton violence. It was very unlikely that he could serve in any kind of managerial capacity. Misha's point seemed valid there. Oh, I know that. This is one Cerberus that's gonna have to make do with less than 3 heads. We can get rid of all of Damrada's employees, maybe, but the biggest headache is the composite division. It'd be a real shame to let go of that force, or rather, to lose all its associated bases. They could cut their losses and run, maybe, but the losses were just too great to contemplate. There was no place in this world that could accept a force of 100,000 out of nowhere. That meant Yuuki would have to leave them all in the lurch, and that, in turn, meant those who didn't escape somehow would doubtlessly be purged. Besides, given what they could guess about Damrada's intentions, it didn't seem like he was telling people about Yuuki's secrets. Okay, so there are a few reasons why Damrada wanted to keep Adora quiet, but I think one of them was to keep Kondo from learning our information. The Imperial Guardians probably aren't a monolith, you know. And the coup we're planning in the capital, I think Damrada wants that to succeed, right? We don't know what his intentions are, but if he wanted to keep us hidden, that would be the only reason why, yes. Yuuki and Kogali seemed to be anticipating each other's thoughts. The rest of the group looked on in confusion. Then, as if unable to bear it any longer, Laplace interrupted. Whoa, wait a sec, boss. The whole idea that he let Adora go on purpose is just a guess on your part, huh? Ain't it more likely that Damrada and Kondo are all buddy-buddy, and we're getting them all wrong? That sounded like common sense to most of them. But not to Yuuki. I doubt it. Look, the whole reason we planned this coup was because of the deal we made with the Demon Lord Gi. Damrada knows that, too. So instead of trying to meddle in our plans, wouldn't he think it better to sow chaos in the capital and pull one over on Gi? Is it even possible? I sure don't know. Ho. Tyr and Footman looked pretty lost, instead focusing on some juggling balls they had on hand. But would someone so close to the Emperor want to see the capital in chaos? Misha asked after organizing her thoughts. But she still failed to understand Yuuki and Kiguli's point of view. Don't think too hard about it, Misha. The important thing is to understand who Damrada had his eyes on as a potential hostile element. Damrada, you know. He never saw Sir Yuuki or Rimuru as his enemy from start to finish. For him, that was Geek Crimson and nobody else. And once you realize that, it makes sense that he'd look the other way while we ran wild all over the capital. Yeah. And Kondo's different. To him, the enemy is not just Gi, but anybody else is against the Empire. He serves Emperor Ludora with a completely different perspective from Damrada's. That, Yuuki concluded, probably meant they were in conflict over assorted matters. It made sense to Kiguli. Well, alright. If you and Lady Kiguli say so, boss, I'll believe you. Laplace was unhesitant in his agreement, Tyr and Footman nodding along. Then Misha looped back to the core question. So, Sir Yuuki, what are your plans for the future? If Damrada turns out to be an enemy, then obviously we can't trust him, regardless of his true intentions. So should we call off the coup and force our way out of here, consequences or not? Fortunately for us, we've got 60% of the composite division blockading the Dwarven Kingdom's eastern city. Add the remaining forces in the capital to that, plus as much support as we ourselves can provide, and it'd be easy to seize a regional city or two. Use those as a base, and the conquered nations with a beef against the Empire will rise up and form a grand anti-imperialist coalition. Yes. Wouldn't that be the best way to secure an army and give us the highest chance of victory? Not a bad idea, no. You don't need to look for long to find regions oppressed by the imperial nobility. Maybe we could style ourselves as a liberation force instead of a rebellion in those areas. So. But sadly, the answer is no. Misha was about to ask why. Yuuki continued before she could open her mouth. The only way for us to survive is to stage the coup as planned. Isn't that right, Damrada? Before Misha could comprehend what he meant, the clowns immediately readied themselves for combat. Then the heavy chamber door opened, and in walked a man. Well said. I'd expect nothing less from you, boss. It was Damrada, dressed in his usual merchant garb. But his demeanor was pure military, and he had no interest in hiding that. The air in the room grew tense. Laplace attempted to make a move, but Damrada stopped him with a quiet command. Don't try it. My men have already surrounded the building. Yuuki, observing the situation, relaxed his body and sank into the sofa. Do you have time to talk a bit? If so, why don't you sit down, too? Boss, we can't just sit here all day. It's fine, it's fine. You just take a seat, okay? Yuuki enjoined the dubious Laplace to return to his seat, then eyed Damrada with a bold smile. So what do you want? I'm afraid you've misread my behavior, boss, so I've come to explain that I have my own problems to consider as well. Damrada took a seat as instructed. Seeing his perfectly calm, collected demeanor made Laplace's crew nervously chuckle. Then, leaving everyone else in the room behind, Yuuki and Damrada began conversing. Problems, huh? Yes. My thoughts, you see, are that I truly do wish you success in this coup, boss. Okay. Then why did you let the door go? Ha ha ha. He's safe, then. I took a gamble on that one, but he always was a very cautious man. I assumed he'd find a way to survive. And you did it to keep Kondo from getting his information. That's right, yes. Didn't you swear an oath of loyalty to the Emperor? I did, yes. You did. Then what about now? I've said this many times before, and perhaps you may choose not to believe it, but my loyalties are to you, boss. Like I can trust you in that. I suppose not. Both of them smiled as they let their tongues do the fighting. I can tell you that burying the door's information has effectively destroyed the armored division. In addition, the magical beast division is now outside the capital city. Even if word of the armored division's status has reached them, it will take some time for them to turn back. The forces currently guarding the capital are greatly reduced in number. The time is now, don't you think? I do. It's so convenient for us that it almost feels like it's been set up. Yes. I've been spending years setting this up for you. Damrada, are you? Look, boss, I have lived my whole life in order to defeat Emperor Ludor. That is the only path left for saving him. The best way to achieve that was by having you take over the Empire. My thoughts on that have not changed, and now everything has been put in place. The rest is up to you to decide. Yuuki snorted, not enjoying this topic at all. Everything was going the way Damrada wanted it, and he was deeply uncomfortable with that. But was rejecting him out of hand the right way, either. Just as Damrada said, the situation couldn't possibly be better right now. The only question was whether to trust him on that. Let me ask you something. Go ahead. Why did you use Clayman like a pawn without consulting me? I had nothing to do with what happened to Clayman. I have an idea of who did it, but I hardly expected him to go to such lengths. There was a moment of silence. Then Yuuki broke it. Is that to cite Kondo? You seem to know a lot about Kondo. There's a lot of secrets around, you know. So don't you think us trusting in you is a little too convenient? Damrada listened to Yuuki's theory silently, a pained expression on his face. Then, after Yuuki was done, he spoke up softly. I cannot tell you everything, because it would be against the law for me. All I can divulge for the moment is that not even I am aware of all of Kondo's capabilities. But even so, I still want you to believe me. His Majesty's salvation is at stake, you know. The clown's cold gazes pierced Damrada. The looks on everyone's faces proved that he was well below their trust. Yuuki was among them. If it were only me, I think I could manage it. But I don't think I can bring everyone else to safety. That leaves accepting his proposal as our only choice, huh? Yuuki calculated his options. Then, suddenly, he noticed Damrada's gaze pointed straight at him, unwavering. Those eyes hadn't changed at all from the day they first met. Yuuki closed his eyes, thinking back to the past. Ever since that moment, Damrada had been nothing but fearless and brazen, willing to accept any request for the right price. It wasn't me, I'm sure. But I really did like those eyes of his. He called Yuuki his boss, swearing his loyalty to him. But there was always something about Damrada that made him seem somehow untrustworthy. Looking back, Yuuki realized, it made him feel unconsciously sad for his comrade. So he opened his eyes, looking toward him. I sense lies in your words. Your allegiance is to me, but at the same time, it's always been to Emperor Lador. That much hasn't changed, am I right? Haha. There's no pulling the wool over your eyes, boss. That murmured affirmation was, in its own way, motivation enough for Yuuki to trust Damrada. Alright. Instead of fighting you guys here, why don't we go out there and make this coup a success? Nobody expressed any dissatisfaction with this. Well, our hands are tied. If Sir Yuuki's made that decision, it's up to us to obey him. Yeah. But if you two-time us, Damrada, I'll see that you pay for it. You have our support, Damrada. Ho ho ho. Don't forget about me. So the clowns made their decision. They opted to trust Yuuki, their boss, a sign of their bonds of friendship, as true as ever. And Damrada was just as much a part of those bonds.